G'day guys, John here for BALO Marine, and today I'm finally back on the Redback. So it's been a while since I've been able to come out on the boat. It's been getting painted, holes patched, 24 holes. It's amazing what you can do with a bit of super glue and some paddle pop sticks. But now, this is the second time I've tried to test her out. The first time was very unsuccessful, so let's have a look at that. I didn't get a lot of footage the first time I took the Redback out. I was hoping to go somewhere a bit more picturesque and then do the filming, but unfortunately I didn't make it very far and I was quite frustrated, so yeah, not a lot of footage. Well guys, this isn't great. My motor's broken down, I'm in the middle of the water. Time to have a look at it. Not the worst place to be broken down, but still very frustrating. So the first time I tried to take her out, I managed to drive the boat about 300 metres, cut out. Every time I tried to drive it after that, it wouldn't go. So I had to just wait for the tide to take me back to the boat ramp. I could have paddled, but I was in no rush. It was a nice day. And then I took her home and started trying to work out what the problem was. So here's the steps I took, what I did to get this motor running again. So the first thing I'm going to try is just seeing how it runs as it is. Primer up. Bit of choke. So my first step was to try and change the fuel line and primer bulb. This was the original fuel line that came with the motor 25 years ago. So I thought maybe that would be the problem. It might be worn out. So I went and got a new one. And let's see if that fixes the problem. I can only hope. So I've seen and heard of instances where the inside of the fuel line has perished and some of the lining can actually get caught up in the fuel line or even in the filter and starve the motor of fuel. So I guess even if this doesn't work, it's preventative maintenance, so it's worth doing. So next what I'm going to do is get a clear bottle and just pump some of the fuel going into the filter, into the bottle, to see what that's like, if there's any water, if it's dirty. So we just got to take this fuel line off. Don't let it spray all over your face like that. That fuel looks pretty clear to me. Looks pretty clean. we'll put that back on, then we'll go the other side of the fuel filter and we'll see what that's like. So that's still looking pretty good. So I dare say the problem is going to be in the carburetor. Before we check the carburetor, we'll just quickly have a look at the spark plugs. Now I know these are new spark plugs, they've only been there for a couple of months, but we'll check them anyway just in case. It's very hard to get the camera to focus on them, but they were pretty good. I gave them a bit of a clean up, but they were both pretty good. And I checked that they had the right gap. So that wasn't an issue at all with the motor, but we still have to check these things just to make sure, because a lot of the times it can actually just be spark plugs that are the issue. And make sure that the spark plugs go back in the same hole that they came out of. That way, if one's damaged, you know that's where the problem is. You don't start getting confused if you do have to go further into it. Now remember, when you do the spark plugs up, do them finger tight, then put your socket on and do them up as tight as you can until you hear something snap. And then back them off slightly. I was a little bit disappointed to see that the bottom spark plug had a little bit of corrosion on the outside of it, but on the inside it was fine. So after trying everything else that I could think of, I decided to bite the bullet and take the carburetor apart, see what was inside. And to my surprise, it actually looked pretty good. It wasn't that long ago that I actually took this carburetor apart when I got water in my fuel. So yeah, I gave it another clean out and there was a bit of rubbish in there. So it was worth doing, and you'll see it here. They're quite easy to take apart, these carburetors. I know a lot of people get nervous taking them apart, but they are fairly easy to work on. I've actually had the conversation with Jock about carburetors, and even he said he gets nervous about the idea of it, but if he was to take it apart, he'd be fine. So don't be afraid to pull it apart. Worst case scenario, you break your motor. So, but that's all right. They're all replaceable. So here we go. We'll take it apart and let's see what we find in there. Actually, a good idea for if you do decide to take a carburetor apart yourself, if you're not real confident, just do what I'm doing here and film it, so then you can watch it back over and see where everything went. Take lots of photos or just record it and you'll be able to work it out. They're not that hard, and there are a lot of tutorials on YouTube on how to do it. I'm not going to bother doing a full tutorial on this because I'm not an expert and I don't claim to be. So I just like to take things apart and see what's wrong with them, see if I can work it out, and see if I can work out how to put it back together. That's always been a bit of a hobby of mine. But you'll see in a second, there is some rubbish in here. I don't get the best view because the glare from the sun was there, but you can see I've just pulled a chunk of gunk out. I couldn't see what was being filmed here, so I'm trying to show things, but it's not really working when you can't see what the camera is capturing. But yeah, all it needs is a bit of this throttle body and carby cleaner, and give it a spray, give it a clean out. Maybe wear gloves. I think I've said this in a past video. Don't be like me, wear gloves when you do things like this, because you're working with chemicals, probably not great for your skin. So do as I say, not as I do, I guess. So now that the bowl's cleaned out, I'll move on to the needle and the float. I'm not the best with the terminology of everything that's inside the carburetor. I just know that it should all be clean. Anywhere where there are holes for fuel to come in or go out, they need to be clean. The holes need to be able to be used, whether it's in the jet or whether it's for fuel to come into the bowl to be used by the carburetor. You just basically pull it apart, clean everything. That's my advice anyway. I have no idea what I'm doing with it really, but I seem to get through it. And as you're taking things apart, once they're cleaned, if you can put it back together, do it while you remember where it goes. That's probably a big piece of advice. I found it so much easier if I can just put it straight back together and not have to look at it in half an hour's time and go, oh, where did this piece go? And that's when you end up forgetting to put things back in. I may or may not do that later in the video, so maybe that was a spoiler. But these jets, now that I'm going to be cleaning out, they're obviously very important. We want to make sure that they're clear. I had a bit of trouble getting it out because my hands are a little bit too big to fit in there, but we get through it. If you can't work out how to take it apart, just give it a few hits like I just did. Things usually fall out if they're supposed to. Or in this case, just keep poking and prodding until it does work. And if you still can't get it to work, just hit it a bit harder like this. Nah, still didn't fix it. Apparently it's not something I can just hit to fix. But then again, maybe shaking it will fix it. Nope, that didn't seem to work either. So, maybe if I go from the opposite direction. No. Sometimes you should just give up and hope that, the YouTube gods will give you a pair of pliers and they'll just appear in your hand like that. There we go, finally got it out. Now, I know it doesn't look like it, but I did actually clean that off camera. I didn't just put it down, then pick it back up and put it back in. But I didn't want to, it was very windy, so I didn't spray outside. I was taking the parts away to clean it, but it was easier to just not bother filming me spraying a bit of carby cleaner in there. So again, make sure you put everything back where it came from. They're usually pretty easy to work out, especially if you get a little plastic cap like I'm taking off now. Remember to put that back in before you put the carburetor back on the motor. It was at this point where I had a feeling that I was forgetting something, but I had a look, couldn't work out what I'd forgotten. So I thought, well, yeah, everything seems cleaned. Everything seems to be back together, so I should just have to screw the bowl back on. And then trying to figure out how to put the bowl back on because I wasn't paying attention. But there's only one way it can go on. And yeah, now I screw it back up and it should all be back together. Obviously the carburetor goes back on the motor the same way it came off, so I didn't bother filming that part. I think that was actually at the time that the camera blew over, so I just put it back together, and here I am tightening it up, struggling a little bit apparently, but I was getting pretty over it by this stage. Just trying to line those long bolts up and then get them tight, and I'm hoping once all this is done the motor's going to work. It's going to run properly, not be coughing and spluttering again. So I've tightened it up, or I am tightening it up, and let's see what happens. So now it's all back together, it's just time to plug the fuel lines back in and then prime it up. Let's see if she runs. Now, because I'm about to start the motor up again, I think I'd better put my tools away first. I don't want them falling off the bench again like last time. So I'm not sure that it's going to work this time, that I pack my tools away, start tidying things up, and then I realise I forgot to put that black cap on that I spoke about earlier. So now I've got to take the carburetor off again. Fun times. Now that everything's back together properly, it's time to put the carburetor back on one last time, and hopefully now everything will be ready to go and she'll fire perfectly. So do up these last two bolts and we're good to go. So at this stage, the motor was still running pretty rough. It was better, but still rough. And I'd gone as far as I was willing to go with pulling the motor apart. So I decided to try and adjust the idle speed and the fuel to air mixing screw. So here's what I did. So the first thing I did was turn up the idle speed a little bit just to make the motor run a bit smoother. And that's this screw here. You can tell which one it is because it connects to the throttle, and you just wind it in a little bit and it turns the speed up on the idle. Now you don't want to turn the idle speed up too much, because otherwise it will be running too fast when you try and put it into gear. It's going to clunk and it can do damage to the gearbox. So I turned it up just enough that it was running smoothly, and then I adjust the air to fuel mixture screw, which is the screw I'm trying to point at the back here, and I adjusted that, and you should be able to tell when it's at the sweet point. It should start to run really, really smoothly, and then you can back off the idle speed a bit and it should still run really smoothly, which is what ended up happening for me. Now that I had it running smoothly, it was time to take it back out on the water. And at first, I was just cruising along fairly slowly here. Wanted to see how the motor would go, and she ran perfectly. So now, most importantly, I've got the boat running again, and running really, really well. I just had it going 23.5 knots, which is very quick for this boat. Motor's running perfectly, and most importantly, there's no water in the boat. So I've lost the ability to cool my feet down on a hot summer's day, but I've gained the ability to take the boat out and not worry that it's going to sink. I don't know which one's better. But just to prove that there's no water, I'll show you around the boat. You are going to have to mind the paint job on the inside. I haven't finished painting it, and there's going to be a floor going in here, hopefully in the next video. So I haven't painted certain areas, but let's have a look at the bottom of the boat. Just ignore the fact that it's messy. I came out here straight after work. That is silver paint that you can see. That's not water. I used a silver paint. It's a bit of an undercoat to try and seal everything. But there is no water, bone dry, looking good. So it looks like I've patched all the holes. It looks like the Redback is going to be around for a little bit longer yet. Hopefully the holes stayed patched, because otherwise I'm going to have to look for another boat, and I don't want to do that. But everything looks like it's going really well, so you should start to see more adventures of me out on my boat, out on the bayliner, and just enjoying being on the water. So alright guys, if you liked the video, please like, subscribe, comment, share, do all sorts of things, because my feet are dry and it feels weird. Anyway guys, catch us in the next video. See ya.